Hey guys, we're going to give this a try and see if it's a little more helpful to everybody. Hope everybody's doing okay. Yeah, you're going to hear dogs barking and people yelling. Such is life. So, remember our unit circle. The 4 points are quadrantal angles, 0, 90, 180, 270, 360. Or, in radians, 0, pi over 2, pi, 3 pi over 2, and 2 pi. Remember, on the unit circle, x coordinate is cosine, y coordinate is sine, and tangent is sine over cosine, or y over x. So now, instead of finding sines and cosines of angles, we're going to graph what the sine and cosine functions look like. So far we've just used the functions, but now we're going to actually graph them because they are functions kind of like y equals x squared, okay, where you put in values for x and you get y values. Well, when we have y equals sine x or y equals cosine x, we put in values for x, or we put in the angle values, and we'll get the y values, which are the sine or cosine values. So we're going to start off and make a chart like we do when we graph. Here are our x values, and when we sub those in, we're going to get our y values. And it's telling us the domain from 0 to 2 pi, which is really like saying from 0 to 360. So we're going to use 0 degrees, pi over 2, or 90 degrees, pi, or 180 degrees, 3 pi over 2, or 270, and 2 pi, or 360. And now we're looking at y, and y is going to be the sine of x. So that means here we're looking at the sine of 0. So do we go to our unit circle, we go to 0 degrees, and remember sine is the y coordinate. So our sine of 0 is 0. Now we want at pi over 2, or 90 degrees. So we go to the unit circle, at 90 degrees, sine, the y coordinate, is 1. Now if you remember back to our trig packets, this is one line of our quadrantal angles chart. So we keep going, 180 degrees, sine, the y coordinate is 0. 270 degrees, sine, the y coordinate is -1. And at 360, we're back to 0. So this goes back to that quadrantal angle chart, the sine, cosine, tangent chart. There's our 0, 1, 0, -1, 0. And this is what we're going to graph to create our sine graph. So now, on page 3, there it is. And if you don't like radians, change it to degrees. 0 degrees, 90 degrees, 180, 270, and 360. And now it's graphing regular graphs. So our x's, okay, 0, 90, 180, 270, 360. We obviously can't use one box. So generally we go 3 boxes. 90, 180, go another 1, 2, 3, 270, 1, 2, 3, and 360. And then for our y's, to give ourselves a little room, we can go 3 boxes up and 3 boxes down for 1 unit. And there's our 0. So at 0, we're at 0. At 90 degrees, sine is 1. At 180 degrees, we're back to 0. At 270, we're at -1, and at 360, back to 0. And then we attach it, and it's got to be curved. It's like a sideways S. Okay, that's what a sine curve, that's the shape of your basic sine curve. And like it said on the first page, sine graphs, a repeating oscillating curve, and so many things rely on sine and cosine. Music is composed of waves, anything that travels in waves. If you remember a few weeks ago, the physics kids were out in the hall with slinkies. They were studying waves, and it's all about sines and cosines and other stuff we'll be getting into. So that's our sine graph. And now, what you need to do for page 4 and 5 is what we did here, but you're just extending your x's. So again, we want to go from negative 2 pi to 2 pi. That's negative 360 to 360. So we'll put it in the chart like that. And we're just going to be using those quadrantal angle values. So negative 270, negative 180, negative 90, 0, and then 90, 180, 270, and 360. Okay, so you already have these 5 boxes. Go back to the unit circle. Okay, go back to the unit circle and remember that negative 90 is just 270. Negative 180 is coterminal with 180. Negative 270 is coterminal with 90. And the sine values are the y coordinates. Okay, so try number 4 on your own, or not number 4, page 4. And then page 5, same thing, except this time we're just going to go from negative 180 to positive 180. So again, go back to your unit circle and use it to come up with those 5 points and graph them. Now, a cosine graph is very similar to a sine graph, okay? Where, you know, remember from our charts from our trig packets, and remember our cofunctions, the sine of an angle is equal to the cosine of its complement. Well, sine and cosine are related to each other. They're the same values, just for the complementary angles. So they're going to have the same shape, but they're really just going to be shifts of each other. So let's look at our cosine graph. And let's start off unit circle. Okay, let's remember we have our 4 points. And you know, if you can remember this unit circle, then you could graph anything we ask you to graph. So this is the point 1, 0. Then we have 0, 1. Then negative 1, 0. And 0, negative 1. This is at 0 degrees, 90 degrees, 180, 270. And remember, 0 is coterminal with 360. If we want to talk about radians, 0 radians, pi over 2, pi, 3 pi over 2, and 2 pi. And remember, to go from degrees to radians, you just do degrees times pi over 180. And that's going to give you your radians. Okay, so now our cosine graph. Now remember, xy is cosine theta, sine theta. So now we're going to be looking at the x-coordinate. And we're going again from 0 to 2 pi. So that really means from 0 to 360. So 0, 90, 180, 270, and 360. But we could put our radians in, pi over 2, pi, 3 pi over 2, and 2 pi. And now we take our x-coordinate. At 0 degrees, our x-coordinate is 1. At 90 degrees, our x-coordinate is 0. 180, we're at negative 1, 270 at 0, and 360, we're back at 1. And again, this line, these values are one of the lines from our quadrantal angles chart. Okay, so now let's go to page 8 and let's graph the cosine graph. Again, if we prefer degrees, not a problem. And it's kind of good if you just remember pi over 2 is 90, and then you don't have to convert it every time. We're going to be doing 0, 90, 180, 270, 360, our quadrantal angles. So we could do what we did with the sine curve, go 3 boxes. So there's our 90, 180, 270, and 360. And now we just graph. When x is 0, y is 1. When x is 90, y is 0. When x is 180, negative 1, and then 0, and then 1. And this is the cosine graph. And let's just compare it to our sine graph. And if we put one on top of the other, if we move the sine graph over to the left by 90 degrees, it's our cosine graph. Or if we move the cosine graph to the right by 90 degrees, it's going to be the sine graph, because they are complementary or cofunctions, 90 degrees from each other. So there's our cosine graph. So now that we've done that, hopefully you guys can now do page 9, graphing cosine from negative 2 pi to 2 pi, and then page 10 from negative pi to pi, just like you did with sine. And with that being done, that's it for today. So please do those pages with graphing the sine and the cosine, and email me. Just take a picture, scan whatever one page. If you need an easy way to scan and send it, there are apps. There's JotNot, there's Genius Scan. You know, if you don't want to take pictures with the phone. So that's just things to think about. And I'll be back tomorrow and we will continue on with this. Thanks. Bye.